Hello, hello. A wonderful day to you. I hope you're having an excellent Onpassive day. I know that I am. My name is Jeffrey Morlock, and I got involved with Onpassive in November of 2018. Once I started to understand the intention that was behind it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, a couple of minutes, some right brain stuff, very subjective stuff about how OnPassive got started and the intention behind it, along with a ton of other stuff. But before I do that, first, I want to show OnPassive to be part of what I consider an inevitable yet anticipated global shift affecting technology, uh, human consciousness, and technology. So, to do that, I want to talk about recent history and evolution of technology that led to the creation of OnPassive and made way for other conscious companies, which we'll talk about. You see, for the past 50 years or so, technology has followed a pretty predictable path. It accelerated as we packed more transistors onto chips, silicon wafers, right? And that was done to make the chips more powerful, and we wanted to have them in smaller devices, right? All about efficiencies. Doing this helped the manual processes that we were working with become automated and caused the productivity to increase that we were wanting, right? And that made life better for everybody. So when we entered into this age, right, it's a new point at which the predictability of progress started closing in a bit, somewhere, shortly after 2010. We entered a period of what we call disruption because most of what we've come to expect from technology was dramatically shifting in new and very cool ways that was upsetting or interfering with the status quo. Now, most of this started somewhere around 1965. At that time, the Intel co founder, Gordon Moore, he published a paper about the number of transistors being put on these integrated circuits or on circuits in general, which was doubling every 2 years. Now, that later became Moore's Law. So, he also predicted that computers were going to be embedded in homes and cars and, you know, uh, communication systems, right? Kind of Orwellian. And I'm sure that none of us would argue this, since even a basic smartphone today is a lot more powerful than some of the supercomputers way back when, right? Now, Moore's Law was problematic for us in our quest for smaller and faster. I mean, there are only so many things that we can put onto a chip before quantum effects cause it to malfunction or not work, right? Now, there's also what we call the von Neumann bottleneck, and that showed us, or represented at least, that it doesn't really matter how fast the chips are if they've got to wait to talk to each other. So we needed more in less, and we needed a lot faster. So, boom, enter 3D tracking. Excuse me, enter 3D stacking, which is combining integrated chips into a single three-dimensional chip. And I'd like to think that this is perhaps where Mr. Mufareh, who we'll talk about later, got his stacking the cool from. So, at any rate, the technology, it allowed more electrical connections between the layers, right, of the printed circuit boards, and that gave us some much wider bandwidth. It also gave us much greater speeds. Now, these were invented and our technologies were worked out in the 80s, and that hardware change moved us from the integrated chip to an integrated system. Now, later on, we had innovations like relational databases, and hang on just a second, let me kill this. We had relational databases and spreadsheets, graphic displays and word processors, things like that, that promoted widespread use of personal computers, the PCs. Now, following that, we moved into the internet, and that led to email and e commerce, and eventually into mobile apps or mobile computing. So we could say the modern world is defined pretty much by the applications that make what we do possible. And these things have forever changed how organizations would be managed. So, until recently, all of these applications have taken place in PCs with a central processing unit that's paired with data and applications that are stored in a separate place. This is what we call Newman architecture or Princeton architecture, simply because of the way the hardware is put together separately, right? This worked well, for what we were doing, but for the power, the bandwidth, and the speed-hungry things that we want computers to do now, like driving self-powered cars and such, we needed more. So the advancement path shifted from developing new applications to developing new architectures, the way that we were putting it all together, right? That could handle the applications that we were creating a lot better. And to understand that concept of progress better, um, I guess so we can see where we were headed. Consider things like neuromorphic computing, which uses electronic circuits to mimic neurobiological architectures. And by that, I mean eyesight, hearing, things of that nature. Um, that type of computing is thousands of times more efficient than conventional chips. Quantum computing, which IBM has already made available in the cloud, right? It gives us a highly superior performance for security applications. There's also what we call FPGA chips, and these are the ones that can be reprogrammed to desired application or functionality, if you will. And they give us superior computational performance as well. And it can be optimized for applications where latency is critical. And we've heard that term before, latency, when Mr. Mufareh and the text talk about data systems, data centers, and the latency between the communications. So putting all this together, when we choose to use a specific application, our devices are going to automatically be switched to the architecture that can run it best. And this will more than likely be in the cloud. Doesn't have to be, but that's the way things are going. And in this way, the entire computing industry is moving from products to platforms, right? This gives us integrated systems that run on platforms. Now, consider this. Um, it used to be that firms, when they were putting their products out, they worked really, really hard to launch something sensational, right? Products that people love to use. And if you look at some of the great companies of the last century, they often rode, you know, their unicorn of prominence um, on the back of a single great product. Some examples would be IBM's System 360, the Apple II, the Sony Walkman, right? Those first successes could then lead to follow ups, and like the PC and the Macintosh, they could lead to further market dominance. Now, consider today's successful companies, right? The ones that you know what they all are, right? The top 6 or 8 that we look at. I mean, there's lots of them, but there's some at the top that everybody knows, right? They make their money off the platforms I'm talking about. Remember, we've gone from products to platforms, right? I mean, look at Amazon. It earned its lion's share of profits from third party sellers, Amazon Prime, and cloud computing. All of these are platforms. And what about Apple's iPhone, right? Without the App Store for Apple, where would that be, right? And that's where so much functionality for the iPhone comes from, is from the App Store, which is a platform, right? Well, we'll get into it. Anyway, platforms are important because they allow us to access ecosystems. See where I'm going with this. You see, today's digital economy is fundamentally different from anything that we had previously. It's not centralized organizations managing assets. We have platforms managing ecosystems. And this means our capabilities are no longer determined by what we own or control, by what, excuse me, they're no longer determined by what we own or what we control. They're determined by what we can access, We have access to it. Because of this, we need to be thinking less about how we build efficiencies and more about how we build connections. We talked about this previously. What we talk about is all about the connection, right? Business is about connectivity and mutual benefit. So again, consider Amazon. Its platform connects ecosystems of retailers to ecosystems of consumers. Boom. I mean, that's huge if you can get understanding with that. Right? The App Store connects ecosystems of developers to ecosystems of end users. IBM embraced the open technology platforms, beginning openly, I believe, in 2015, because they get access to capabilities far beyond their own engineers. And the new technology is all about connecting, and it's all about um, uh, working together in collaboration, right? And the future is actually belonging to those of us that can widen or deepen the connections that we make through all of these digital, conduits, so to speak. Now, despite its near spiritual modality, digital technology is beginning to power new areas in the physical world. Yeah, that's kind of freaky, right? Such as genomics and robotics. And they're already having a deep impact on some very high potential fields like renewable energies, right? Renewable technologies, medical research, logistics. Now, in this age of disruption, like we're in, according to Clayton Christensen's groundbreaking theory of disruptive innovation, which supports a future where artificial intelligence is a business tool that causes innovations to increase powerfully and quickly so capital is more accessible. We don't have a whole lot of choice but to adapt to it. And that's where we are now. We're adapting. And we're doing a pretty good job of it from what I see as I sit in the passenger seat of Onpassive, enjoying the journey while I'm moving into the future. And I believe that we will command an extraordinary view as we move into the next shift. Now, that shift, the shift into quantum technology, has already started. And with it has come the ability to create unbreakable encryption. I'd love to see them do a base 12 personally, the mathematics for base 12. But it also can supercharge the development of artificial intelligence. It can radically accelerate development of medicine and drug treatment, right? Renewable energies, materials, science, and a whole world of other really, really cool things. Not to mention the metaverse and the metaverse's ability to mimic reality. Imagine that, right? Reality 2.0 with extended, augmented, and virtual realities. I mean, so real that it's another dimension. So this is our history. This is how we got where we are. And life is going to be pretty good for us. So we need to be in the best shape of our lives right now or get ready to be there. In part two, I'd like to talk a little bit about spiritual and technological human evolution and the global change that we're all immersed in. Yeah, it's a bit on the fringe, but it's pretty cool stuff once you start to get the picture. I want to thank you so much for listening. Please, to learn more about Onpassive, please check out onpassive.com and all our feeds in the social media platforms. And please know that we only wish blessing and blessing upon you and upon your future. Thank you.